Well, here we are. It's July 1st. The dawn of the new era. I obviously recorded this yesterday. We always record these a day ahead. So I'm assuming that college sports still exists here on July 1st as we officially and formally move into the house era. I assume that, there wasn't some kind of finger snap and half the college football programs in America disappeared. I think that's what happened in that movie, right? I see enough memes about it that I never actually saw the movie, but I've seen enough memes that I think that's what happened in the Avengers movie, right? They snap their fingers and half the people die. Did they snap their fingers last night at midnight and half the college football programs in America died? Probably not. I assume that there's still something to talk about if you cover the great middle of college football, as we do with like so many others, covering teams in the ACC and Big 12 and bottom half of the Big 10 and bottom half of the SEC and throughout the sport. I assume that they all still exist in this new world of college sports, which has started today. And we've talked about this from a lot of different angles. We talked about what it means for Pitt. We've talked about how they're going to come up with the money to do it. But now here we really are. Here we really are. Years of slips and slides and slippery slopes and snowballs, lots of things that started with S, have gotten us to this point where college sports is now closer than it's ever been to a full-blown employment system. There was an article/column/piece from Ross Dellinger yesterday on Yahoo talking about collective bargaining and how the AD at Tennessee is trying to push for a collective bargaining agreement and or steps toward collective bargaining and all the challenges within. And there are lawyers who say it can be done and lawyers who say it can't be done, and they probably had a pre-agreement on who was going to take which side so they can make sure they all get paid, because everyone is getting paid. And now, finally, years after it should have happened, the student athletes are getting paid and will be getting paid. So how does it feel? I mean, you're now officially in this era. How does it feel? Does it feel different from yesterday? Probably not. Will it feel different on August 30th when you watch them take the field and know that guy out there, that kid out there, that 19-year-old out there who just dropped a pass is getting $30,000 this month? And I mean, you've experienced that and lived it and thought about it with professional sports for your whole life. You've looked out there and said, that guy's getting paid, $11 million this year, and he just missed that kick or something. I don't think they pay kickers $11 million, but, that guy's getting paid like, 7 or 8 figures this year, and he just booted a ball in center field and refused to turn around and run after it. Well, now it's college sports too. And there's still more questions than answers. There's still more uncertainty. There's still more instability. There's still more conflict. But we're in this new era now with new rules where players, student athletes, and I think the Tennessee AD wanted to just change it to employee athletes, they now work for the school because they get paid. They get the money. I didn't even really sit down with we usually have like a topic or a question, like yesterday, what are Pitt's biggest questions entering the 2025 season, or, what's this or what's that? Probably tomorrow we'll talk about the defensive ends, Pitt's history with defensive ends under Narduzzi, this kind of stuff. But I didn't have anything like that today, because today, this is a day that is pretty infamous, I think, and will live in some degree of infamy. And I hate to say it like that because it's obviously not Pearl Harbor, but it is a day of infamy in college sports. July 1st, 2025. The day it became official and legal and allowed for colleges to pay the student athletes. And so what happens next? How do we get to this point? Is this a solution? And what happens next? We're going to talk about the new world of college sports post-house settlement, or in the house settlement, here on today's edition of the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Yeah, it's Tuesday on the Morning Pitt. YouTube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Chris Peak from Panther-Lair.com hanging out with you this morning for a little bit of Pitt sports talk. College sports talk really is what it is. Of course, we have all of the coverage you could possibly handle at Panther-Lair.com. Panther-Lair.com, Pitt side on the 24/7 Sports Network, is the place you can get all of your Pitt coverage. Pitt football, Pitt basketball, Pitt recruiting, Pitt transfer portal, Pitt NIL, Pitt whatever is going on. We cover it all at Panther-Lair.com, and that's the place to go hang out with other Pitt fans. It's the best online community of Pitt fans you're going to find, and I think great content as well. So go check it out if you're a Pitt fan, Panther-Lair.com, and our YouTube channel right here, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's a place we have all of our Pitt video content. These daily morning Pitt videos, Monday through Friday, a little bit of Pitt sports talk to get your day started. And look, there was big Steelers news yesterday, which means everybody's going to be talking about the Steelers news that, about Jalen Ramsey for the next 3 weeks. But we give you Pitt sports talk. Maybe an island of Pitt sports talk amid all of the other stuff that's out there. And all that stuff is good and useful and valuable and entertaining. But if you want a little bit of Pitt, here you go. Right here on the Morning Pitt, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. We have our weekly live show we do every Wednesday night at 8:30 p.m. here on YouTube. And we have post-game shows and press conferences and interviews, all kinds of stuff for you to enjoy here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That way you won't miss any of our Pitt video content. So it's July 1st. It's the new era of college sports. We have arrived. We'll move forward. And like I say, as I was thinking about what to do here for today's, Morning Pitt, I was like, well, I feel like we should commemorate it in some way. We should somehow, put down some document for posterity to reflect back on what we were thinking of this era of college sports at its dawn. At its it's not its conception, it's its birth. This new world of college sports that we're in. And I'll tell you one thought that I keep coming back to, and I've come back to this a lot of times. And, I usually come back to it when I start thinking about, how did you get to this point? How did we end up here in college sports? Whether you think it's good or bad, how did we end up at this point? And the thing I keep sort of landing on is that every step of the way, it was like the NCAA and amateurism died by 1,000 paper cuts of just okay, give a little bit, and then that becomes a slippery slope and it snowballs and becomes something bigger. And then you give a little bit more on something else, and that slippery slope snowballs and becomes something bigger. And nowhere along the way, at no point did anyone in charge have an actual plan. At no point did anyone in charge have the foresight to say, look where this is going. Okay, let's be realistic about where this is going, because we're letting multiple genies out of the bottle here that we're not going to be able to put back. We're not going to be able to close the doors that we are opening here. We're opening them a crack, and they're going to be open wide open. And we're not going to be able to close them. Player movement is not going to be restricted by rule of the NCAA. Anything that's already been accomplished in terms of player movement, the NCAA is not going to be able to walk that back. Now, maybe as you get into contracts, collective bargaining and whatnot, you could have multi-year contracts that keep players in place for a couple of years and sort of minimize the year-to-year, roster overhauls that we're seeing right now with the transfer portal. But you're not going to close that box. You're not going to close that door. And because they never really had the foresight to get ahead of it, and because they never really saw down the road where this is going to lead, and the fans saw it, and I think some coaches saw it, where NIL and the transfer portal would lead, and how the two sort of independently could be, useful and valuable and probably right and just, but putting them together just created an untenable situation that has thrown the whole sport into instability. And I think some coaches saw it coming. I think a lot of fans saw it coming. I remember getting text messages from people 2 years ago, 3 years ago. That's it. They've ruined it. College sports is dead or dying. And me, I'm always the type that sort of resists the idea that there will be seismic change of any kind at all, that, what looks like it's going to be a major thing, it's probably going to end up being more of a blip. It's not going to be as crazy as... No, but in that case, it really did. It became everything that the... what do you call it? The doomsdayers, all the chicken littles around college sports 4 years ago, 5 years ago, have been proven absolutely right, beyond a shadow of a doubt. Like everything that people told you was the worst possible, like the worst case scenario outcome from the combination of NIL and the transfer portal, they were absolutely right because it has become exactly that. Exactly that. And it's almost sort of remarkable. And it's because the people in charge, with whatever waning power they still had, were unable to get in front of it and create parameters and establish a system. And so they kept giving a little, letting a little, okay, you can do this, okay, you can do that. And it kept blowing up in their faces to the point where anyone involved in decision-making at the highest levels over the last 5 to 10 years should be embarrassed and considered a major blight on their resumes. That the way we finally got to compensating student athletes, which probably should have been happening for a long time, but the way we finally got there was by 1,000 paper cuts. And the most unstable, chaotic way you could possibly arrive at that conclusion. And so we're at a point right now where, I mean, you're talking about players getting 5 figures a month. Like freshmen who have never played before in college coming in getting 5 figures a month. You know, college student athletes getting $500,000 a year, $600,000 a year, $1 million a year, $2 million a year. Because you have this unregulated system. And, you know, we are moving into this new era where you can have the revenue sharing. And I don't really think that's going to change all that much. I think you're still going to have a largely unregulated system. Forgive me if this NIL Go, where you have to get your NIL deals approved by a national council that's going to make sure that you're getting really paid for actually doing something. I mean, like, all you did was create more paperwork. You're not going to curtail it. If they want to find a way to get the money to the kids, they'll get the money to the kids. And if they have to fill out more paperwork to do it, then that's what they'll do. Now, for a school like Pitt, what this, you know, the one thing revenue sharing has done is it doesn't level the playing field. The playing field will always be unlevel, unequal. You know, I don't think you're ever going to get to a playing field as equal as the NFL has, right, with a salary cap, and you know, revenue sharing and all of that, because you're always going to have the element of donors and boosters who can go over and above and beyond the money that the schools have. They can always bring in more money to get the talent that they want. And so it's never going to be an even playing field. It's never going to be level. But what it has done is by instituting revenue sharing, you're giving Pitt, the university, the opportunity to raise the level of the amount of money that can go to the kids. That can go to the student athletes, the employee athletes, or whatever we want to call them. Whereas, you know, last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, it was mostly, almost entirely reliant on the donors and people donating to third-party collectives and then getting the money to the kids that way. Now, that's still going to be part of it, but now you've got an opportunity for the university to be involved and be more involved. And I think in Ross Dellinger's article yesterday, it was talking about, you know, Ohio State spent $35 million on their roster last year. They're only going to spend $27 on their roster this year. They'll actually, some of the players will have their money go down. I'll believe that when I see it. I think it's possible, but I think you're still going to have those third-party NIL groups relying on donations and giving money to the kids. And so you'll still have that separation of haves and have-nots. And those schools that have the boosters with the deepest pockets, the most resourceful, passionate boosters and fan bases, will still get the best players. You're still going to have that happen. But if the revenue sharing leads to, you know, if it evens out the numbers a little bit or gets, you know, schools like Pitt a little bit closer to schools like Ohio State, now you're making yourself more competitive, where maybe you get the dollar amount to be minimal enough that it's not the deciding factor for a kid when he's picking a school. And then also, if you can work these revenue sharing deals and contracts, which I think, you know, I read, or a lot of them are being treated as sort of marketing deals where student athlete signs his name, image, and likeness rights to the school, and the school sort of pays him for it. You know, if you could do that and do it in a multi-year structure, multi-year contracts, even if it's not a contract, but some sort of multi-year agreement with early withdrawal penalties and buyouts and all these things, to keep kids in place, to keep the players in place for a little while. Again, because you're not going to establish a new rule that restricts movement, but you can work within the system to perhaps keep guys in the same place for a little while, which I think would help with some of the fatigue that fans are feeling, some of the fatigue that coaches are feeling, and maybe get a little bit of stability. But again, that's the system and the schools figuring it out, whereas the people in charge, the NCAA, obviously, and you could include probably the conference commissioners, just let it ride for so long and let it fester and let it grow on its own until it was out of their control. Whatever control they had, it was out of their control. And you get what we have here now, which is chaos, instability, and a system that, even though it's moving into a new era that should be more structured and maybe a little bit more stable, still feels very much like it's far from the final fix. The final fix is going to have to be employee status, collective bargaining agreements, and full-blown structure. A full-blown structure comparable to what the NFL has. And that's the only end game that makes sense. It's the only end game that keeps schools competitive. It's the only end game that holds on to the fans, quite frankly. Because I think there is fatigue among the fans when it comes to NIL and the transfer portal. I think the fans have suffered over the last 5 years. And, I mean, you could say, well, fans had it made for 140 years prior to that, and okay. But the last 5 years has taken a lot out of the fans, I think. And you mix in the fact that it's very easy and comfortable to watch games on TV now. I think fans stay away. And so the national championship game does great ratings, and the Final Four of the college football playoffs does do great ratings. But it's a little bit different when you're watching TV versus going to the games and supporting in that way. This new stage, however long it's going to last, needs to work enough to sort of reestablish some of those connections with the fans and take away some of that fatigue that I think they're feeling. And then whatever the next stage is, which, again, I think will be employee status and collective bargaining, that they've got to get it right in a way that keeps the fans engaged and gives them something to root for. So we're in the new era. It's the first day of a new era of college sports. Let's see what the next day looks like. Maybe there'll be a little bit of stability, though. Maybe things will settle in a little bit just for the time being until the next major change comes along. I don't know. But it's July 1st, so here we are. All right, make sure you like this video and subscribe to youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It won't be a rambling stream of consciousness tomorrow. We have something a little bit more tangible to discuss, so we will do that on tomorrow's Morning Pitt. I hope you can tune in for that one. Make sure you check out the website Panther-Lair.com, the Pitt site on the 24/7 Sports Network. And like I say, like this video and subscribe, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. So thanks for watching today. I hope you had a great Monday. Your week got off to a great start yesterday. Enjoy your Tuesday, and we'll catch up with you tomorrow for the Morning Pitt right here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.